Let's move on to our last subject. Brad, before I get into it, I'm just curious, how would you define middle class in America?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this in advance of this segment, and I think there's like maybe a very literal definition that you could look up. I don't know, maybe it's the middle quintile, the middle 20% of income earners. But I think when we talk about middle class, we really kind of mean like middle upper, right? At least in the connotation growing up, like middle class was always like, oh, you're like well off, you're like fairly affluent, you're not rich, but you're doing decently in life, and you're comfortable. Is kind of how I've always thought of it. So you can own a home, you are not living paycheck to paycheck, you have some savings, you maybe can afford a vacation once a year, but you're not like balling out, but you're not, working class. You're not really struggling to pay the bills either. That's kind of how I would define it formally and informally.
Yeah, I'm with you, especially on that last part, because this made me think about that too. And I'll give the technical definition in just a minute. But when I think of middle class, I think of more of those sort of definitions that you just gave, right? Like, I don't know that in my mind, I was trying to think what do I quantify as rich? Would I say $500,000 a year is rich? I'd probably say it was upper middle class, I guess. I don't know. I was kind of thinking that through. I think when I really have to sit down and define it, there is the impoverished class, and to me that's people who are making below the poverty threshold, probably on government assistance of some point. And then there's the middle class, and the middle class is huge, right? Because it spans from people who could be making, let's say, just above that line, which would be around $30,000, $35,000 a year, all the way up to people I think making hundreds of thousands. You have the lower middle class, the middle class, and the upper middle class. But as long as you are having to live within a budget, as long as you own one house, as long as you are living sort of this middle income lifestyle, I think that's how I identify the middle class more than anything. You can probably access a home, you can pay your bills, you have savings, you probably aren't living paycheck to paycheck, but you might not be too far from that. You're living within a budget, and you're able to afford a vacation, you're able to have kids. It's more of these things that you can have in middle class that I think of versus a number. And then when it gets to wealthy, I think of the wealthy people are people who mostly don't have to work for an income, who can live off investments, who have multiple houses, who fly first class everywhere. I have some of these lifestyle things I attribute to that. So according to the Pew Research Center, just to give the actual definition, they say that households that earn between 2/3 and double the median U.S. household income, which is $65,000 in 2021, those people are basically middle class. And they say middle income is a makeup of people who make between $43,000 and $130,000 a year. So they have a much smaller bucket than I do. But I want to start off by playing you this TikTok where this guy, and I follow him a good bit, he has a lot of interesting economic takes, but he argues that $74,000, which is a bit above the median income in America, is not really middle class anymore. And this caught the attention of the Dave Ramsey show. So I want to first roll you his video and then get into what the Dave Ramsey show take was on this as well.
Gen Z doesn't agree that $74,000 is middle class. No kidding, it's not even close. Check this out. If you take $74,000 for a Gen Z, or let's say they have a bachelor's degree and they're 25 years old. First of all, $74,000 is much higher than the average income. Most Gen Zers are probably making anywhere from 40 to 50, maybe 60, but let's use 74. The take home after taxes, 401k, and health insurance is $4,300. The average college monthly payment on a loan is about $500. You're down to $3,800. Let's say this person is financially responsible, decides to split a 2-bedroom apartment in a medium-sized city like Orlando, so that their payment is $1,200 a piece, $200 for utilities, so $1,400. Now, unless they're going to have Lucky Charms and peanut butter and jelly, their groceries are going to cost about $600 if they're trying to get chicken, beef, and some healthy stuff. You have a $400 car payment, $200 in insurance, $150 for gas, $100 for a cell phone, leaves you with $950. This is no savings, investment, no emergency fund. Let's give them at least $300 to go on a couple dates or to hang out with their friends for the month so they can enjoy life a little bit. They're left with only $650. A bachelor's degree, $74K salary. You are splitting a 2-bedroom apartment with a friend and only have $650 left a month. It would take you years to save up the $30,000 that you would need for a down payment on a house with the closing costs. But even if you could get that down payment saved, you would still need to make $120,000 a year to be considered for a $400,000 loan. The middle class, the goalpost has been moved from $70K to $120,000 in just the past 2 years.
So Brad, when I saw this video, there's a few things I might tweak, but as a whole, I think this mostly tracks. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I would quibble with a few things. Like, I don't think the statement about the average student loan payment being $500 a month is quite right. The averages are skewed by the high end. The median is closer to $300, but like, I could nitpick it a bit, but I get his point. I certainly get his point. The one thought that came to mind is the huge variable here is where. Because I'll tell you that where I live in Grand Rapids, or even say that you had a remote job making 74K and you lived in one of the suburbs of Grand Rapids, you would absolutely be middle class and you could totally afford your own non-shared apartment for $1,400 a month or less. Now, DC, you would be, I think, I wouldn't call you poor or working class, but I wouldn't really call you middle class with that kind of income. You would be struggling to make your bills and put money aside. Absolutely. I also think it depends how much debt you have. If you're single, if you have kids, if you have two people earning incomes of 74K, I think you'd be pretty well off, actually. But yeah, a lot of variables, but I certainly, I get the sentiment. My thing, though, was I'm curious who or what he blames for this. But my first thing was like, to get from 74K a year to the 4,000 something a month take home pay. Well, where did all that money go? Let's talk about like maybe we could address this problem by putting half of that back in people's pockets. But because you and I know this from Based, the amount of expense on payroll to pay someone the money versus what they actually get in their bank account is insane. It is insane.
We knew that when we started a company, but both Brad and I had sticker shock when we saw what we had to pay just to employ ourselves. It is insanity. It is absolutely insanity. And it goes towards things oftentimes that we don't even need, like unemployment insurance. Like neither of us is ever going to be unemployed. We're going to always work. And so like,
as if Social Security will exist for either of us. Lol.
Yeah. LOL. So yeah, he's not an overtly political commentator. I've really never seen him kind of tip his hat either way. He's more of a like breakdown, just like facts of what the economic picture is. So I don't know that he would necessarily say what's to blame here, but you're absolutely right. And a few things that I want to point out here that I think are interesting, because I lived on $74,000 a year at one point, but I lived in more expensive cities, to be very fair. Nashville's a smaller city, but it's very expensive because so many people from LA have come to Nashville and it's really driven up the prices. And then, of course, I moved to New York City. So I was having to contend with some different things because of those scenarios. But I found that I was absolutely living paycheck to paycheck at that point. And I'm somebody who's pretty good with my money. So I'm going to roll this other clip from the Dave Ramsey show in just a second. But I'll go ahead and say, I don't think any of this is outlandish. His loans are a bit more than what most people pay, but not ridiculously so. The picture of rent, even in splitting that with somebody else, is pretty accurate in most cities. Now, of course, you can move out to more rural areas. You can live further from your job. All of that is a reality. I understand that. But at the end of the day, like, how much cheaper can you get rent? I mean, the last time I was looking around, like, having rent under $1,000 a month is just not a reality in the vast majority of places. And again, when we're talking about a young person here, one, they're most likely not making $74,000 because that's higher than the median. So especially right out of school or right into the workforce, you're probably not making that. But even if you are, you're in an entry-level job, that's probably going to be more in a city. You know, you're probably going to have to live in some of these more urban areas to like get your foot in the door before you can get a job where you're remote or you can live wherever you want. So I think that's accurate. The $600 a month for food is accurate. Groceries are astronomical. I'm mostly only buying groceries for myself most of the time, and I could easily spend that on groceries. The $400 a month car payment, also, I think that's very realistic. It's actually a bit beneath what many car payments are these days. I'm seeing a lot of people paying $700-800 a month for a car, which is insanity. But it is.
I don't have any sense on that because I've always bought cars used.
Oh, I've been watching some content around this, and I can't fathom. I've never paid more than $400 a month for a car, and I've always had nice cars. So I don't understand what's going on, but people are just not being savvy with their car choices.
But also the prices of used cars and rental cars and everything went way up because a bunch of people sold off their fleets during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I
got lucky because my brother runs finances for a car dealership, so I get cars at cost through him. So I do have a little connection there. But this last part I want to point out here, okay? When he says $300 for fun and $650 left over, that is not realistic for a woman. is all I want to say, because even after all these bills are paid, and this is somewhat true for men too, but you have to buy grooming, you have to buy makeup, like just a Target run. I'm talking like refill your shampoo and conditioner, like refill your shaving cream. I'm not talking anything outlandish. I'm saying keep your basic supplies filled up month to month. Even if you're doing like your hair at home, your nails at home, like that costs money. Makeup costs money. You have a pet, you have to pay money for their food. Like this leftover money would get eaten up really fast. Gym memberships, like basic Netflix subscriptions, like without anybody doing anything where you could say like they're living far beyond their means, right? So I just want to call attention to that like this leftover money right here would not really have been that much left over for most people. Like I'm sure you could, I don't know what men do with their money, Brad, but women have to do a good bit of upkeep is all I'm saying. It costs money. Men need to keep that in mind. It costs money to be pretty.
Okay.
All right. Well, I want to go to the Dave Ramsey show where they definitely don't care about whether or not you're pretty, much less anything else. They took this guy to task. It's not actually Dave Ramsey himself, it's some of his co-hosts, but I want to air this clip from their show.
Number one, when my guy said only $650 left, there were a couple of things that are screaming at me. A, only $650 left. I think that if you're just starting out, you're in your 20s, I'm like, yeah, that
if
ain't
you're
bad.
22 years old and you have $650,000 left over,
Come on, somebody. Number two,
pretty good. That's good.
then I'm like, okay, I'm just getting into $300 on fun money. Again, that's a lot of money. Like, that ain't bad. Can I be 100% real talk?
Yeah, go.
On my budget right now,
Yeah.
where it says Jade Fun Money, it's $300. And I'm telling you, I make more than $74,000 a year. So, okay.
Okay, and then, so then add in, which is normal, I get, but what if you decided to get an extra job and pay off this debt? You would free up a car payment.
$400.
And free up $500 student loans. That's $900. $600 for groceries for a single person. I think you can do it at $500. So that's an extra $100 that you take out.
Yes.
So there's an extra $1,000. So that's really $1,600 extra.
Yeah.
I think we're okay.
I think this is an
we're okay.
expectation conversation.
Yes. And we're not going to make $74,000 forever, ever, amen.
No.
Or
no.
$40,000 forever and ever and amen, or whatever it is, right? As you get older and you work, you will be making more money over your lifetime. That is true.
This really rubbed me the wrong way, Rachel.
Brad, I don't know if you've seen this, but Dave Ramsey and co have been going through the ringer lately. People are not happy with them. And to be honest, I'm kind of in the like anti-Dave Ramsey crew lately. And I'm somebody who's sort of like liked some of Dave Ramsey's advice over the years, but he has and his team have been coming off as so detached from reality and some of their recent statements. I think this is one of them. I don't mind the advice of like get a second job, pay off debt one bit. I still think that's pretty solid advice. It's not a bad idea. That's, you know, something they often have gotten pushback on. So I'm not in that camp. But this assertion that she makes that like you won't always just make $74,000. Well, yeah, a lot of people will always just make $74,000 or less because that is median income. So this could be like the rest of your life. And in this scenario, again, this person is splitting rent. That's great. If you get married and you have somebody you can like have two incomes or you're sharing those bills with, but more and more Americans are not getting married and are single. And so having to have a roommate into your 30s, 40s, that starts to get a little weird. Like that could really put a, kind of damper on your prospects for actually meeting somebody and getting married, especially if you're a man. So I didn't think that this was really a fair reaction to what he's trying to say. And when people like write off this economic picture and sort of just like get over it, you just have an expectation problem. I do think that's why people aren't as interested in ideas on the right, because there's no sympathy and it glazes over the reality. And even just saying things like you said earlier, like, yeah, this is not good. It's in large parts the government's taking so much money from you or like devaluing your currency. Instead, it's just like, get over it. You're entitled. I don't think this is an entitled thing. I think expecting the middle class lifestyle is what most Americans are after. And if you work hard, you're working full time and you are doing what you've been told to do to achieve that, and you get there and you find that you can't achieve it, that's infuriating because it's not asking for too much. You're asking for the ability to have a home, a stable home. You're asking for the ability to save for your retirement. You're actually still trying to do the right thing, the financially responsible thing, and finding that you are not able to do it. And that is demoralizing. And that is something that then will make people turn their back on the system, which many of them believe to be capitalism, right? And I think that's why you see a lot of people getting mad at the current situation and saying, like, this is late stage capitalism. And when you respond to that, you're just like, get over it. You're entitled. You're fine. You have $600 left over a month, which again, like, no, you really wouldn't. That is not a long-term answer for what's happening. It's not okay that if you're doing these things and you're making above the median income for an American, you still can't afford these basic staples of a middle-class average life. That's not something that's going to go anywhere good if it doesn't go answered and if people aren't given the tools that they need to adequately address the problem.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. We do see entitlement on TikTok. This wasn't it, though. This wasn't really it. Like, we see those, like, I don't want to work, or why do I have to have a job, or like that kind of we do see that content all the time. But this was like, hey, I'm working full time. Why am I still so strapped? Like, why are my expenses so high? And we should have sympathy for people in that situation, because the prices of things have gone way up. We had inflation, and now they keep saying inflation is lower, and that's true. But again, the inflation rate is lower. That means prices continue to go up at a slower rate. Doesn't mean prices ever leveled back out or went back down. No, that never happened. So I have sympathy for people that things are increasingly way too expensive and they can't afford things the way that they should be able to. Now, do they have the correct diagnosis about that? Probably not. Many of them don't. Do they just oftentimes gravitate towards solutions that are really what created the problem in the first place? Yes. But I still think we should have sympathy and compassion for people who are struggling to afford life, because there's only so much people can pull themselves up by their bootstraps when things around them are getting expensive due to things that are totally beyond their control.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the overall point of his video and many of his videos, he really addresses a lot of the housing market crisis. And that's kind of where he's going towards the tail end of it and saying, if this is your picture, this is what your budget looks like on a month to month, how do you ever actually start really saving for a house and get your foot in the door for homeownership? And, you know, we talk about the housing crisis a lot as well, but I want to like really take a moment to emphasize just how bad that is for the middle income people in America, because throughout history, you know, even lower middle income people, they were able to do the right thing, work hard, save their money, and get a house. Maybe it was a small house, very unglamorous house, they could get a house. My grandfather had an 8th grade education, worked in a pipe factory every day of his life, and he built his own house with, you know, his hands, and his neighbor who was his friend, but he was able to acquire land and acquire the building supplies and build a house. And he was able to raise his family in that house and ensure that, you know, they had that as a consistent place to go. When people are not able to get on that ladder to acquire home ownership and they're doing all the right things and they're working really hard, not only is that demoralizing and depressing when you feel like, you know, I did what I was supposed to and it's not adding up, but it is long-term going to mean significantly less wealth for them over time, because home ownership is what the middle class has really made most of its money off of in recent decades. That is where people have acquired their equity. That is really something that they have often used to fund a lot of their retirement. And if you can't get on that ladder, which would be just obtaining the first kind of entry-level baseline home and then stay there for a bit, sell it, take your equity, keep moving up, keep getting a little bit better and better, you're really going to be stuck kind of on a hamster wheel for a lot of your life. And you are going to miss out in a significant portion of the funds that other people are able to acquire through that process. So what it spells for the middle class long term, I think is even more impactful than what the picture is just right now on its face.